Topic for this video is Domar's growth model. In our one of earlier videos, we have discussed Harrod's model, because the one model of growth that was given by Harrod, similar to that in some sense, was that of Domar. So that is why it is generally called Harrod-Domar growth model, giving the impression as if Harrod and Domar both are the co-author of this model, while it is not. Both have given their model separately. Both belong to different countries. Harrod to England and Domar to United States of America. Both presentation of both was separated by considerable number of years, probably 10 years, and during which even the Second World War was also fought. And these things I have mentioned perhaps in my earlier video on Harrod. So today we will be concentrating only on Domar, because as far as the conclusion of both the models are concerned, they are almost same. They point to the problem of stability in the economy while economy is growing, and the difference between the two is that of only the details that I will be pointing out later, right? I have also told you while discussing Harrod's model that both Harrod and Domar presented their dynamic model in Keynesian framework. I mean, the framework of the model was same. That was the Keynesian static or the comparative static model. Harrod and Domar both, they have dynamized it. Further, whereas the Keynesian model was the Shortrun model, Domar's and Harrod's model is the dynamic one, and that have to be dynamic if you are dealing with the question of growth. So growth model simply means what should be the requirement of the equilibrium while economy is growing. Okay, so you have to see it in the perspective when economy is continuously changing. In this context, I have also mentioned, but it is pertinent to mention it again in the context of Domar, that of the two roles that investment performs in the economy, Keynes had emphasized only one, because his was the short-run model. What these two roles are: one is the productive capacity augmentation, that is, when the investment will take place, economy's productive capacity will expand. And second is income generation. That is, when investment begins to take place, even when the output as a result of that investment in the form of goods or the service, eventually the income of various sections of the society begin to generate. So in the short run, Keynes had considered only income generation aspect, because and that is why he emphasized on aggregate demand, because aggregate supply is fairly stable in the short run, because its determinants are fairly stable in the short run. But in the long run, you cannot escape from this function also, and you have to see to it as to how the equality between the two could be brought about. And if that remains elusive, then economy will not be in equilibrium. Rather, it will be difficult to regain the equilibrium if once economy misses the equilibrium. So we will see it. So here for Domar, both the functions of the investments are important. So one deals with what is known as supply side. Okay, that is the productive capacity augmentation, where the delta change in income in terms of the productive capacity has to be delta K, that is investment, delta K is investment, K is capital stock. So change in capital stock is inevitably investment, because investment as per definition is the addition to the existing stock of capital, and this multiplied by delta income, delta output capital ratio. Okay, how many units of capital will be required to produce 1 unit of output, and at what rate this situation is changing, whether while economy is growing, this is changing somehow. So this will determine as to at what rate the productive capacity augmentation will take place. However, the model assumes that since technology is constant, so this ratio will remain constant. That is one of the assumption of the model. So that productive capacity augmentation will depend on the rate at which the investment is taking place. And investment in turn depends on the rate of savings in the economy. Similarly, the demand side, this was supply side, and demand side has to be the delta investment multiplied by 1 by small s I have used here. I'll explain as to what do I mean. This is delta investment, that at what rate the investment is changing per period of time. Okay, and 1 by s is simply the Keynesian multiplier. That explains that when an investment takes place in the economy, income in the economy increases by a multiple of that investment. I mean, that to the extent the investment has increased, income will increase by a multiple of that. For example, this value, multiplier value is 4, and the investment to the extent of, for example, $100 has taken place, the income generation will be to the extent of $400. Okay, so this S is dy by dk, by the way, is this change in capital output ratio, or the incremental capital output ratio. Rather, I should write it here, that delta K is the change in capital stock, and delta y by delta K is marginal or incremental output capital ratio. Output capital ratio. So let me separate it out. Okay, and here 1 by s is nothing but the multiplier. Please recall that value of multiplier depends on marginal propensity to consume. Okay, that is K, that is used normally, I mean the Keynesian framework that is used to denote the multiplier value. It is different from K, which stands for the capital stock. So don't be confused. I'm just referring to this so that your memory of multiplier gets refreshed. So K is equal to 1 upon 1 minus MPC. This is what we have seen, and we have found that if MPC will be higher, value of multiplier will also be higher. So since MPC plus MPS is equal to 1, that is marginal propensity to consume plus marginal propensity to save, marginal propensity to save will be 1, simply on the basis of the logic that the income will either gets consumed or it will be saved. So together they will be the total of the income. So instead of 1 upon 1 minus MPC, you can write 1 upon MPS, and MPS we are representing here by simply S. There's no need to write the full MPS, although S is simply marginal propensity to save. So now, having identified our both sides that ought to be equal in equilibrium, let us see as to what will happen. Stability or the equilibrium in the economy demands that supply side and the demand side both should be equal in any time period. But time period is important here. Now in this case, as the investment is expanding the productive capacity, there has to be a sufficient generation of income so as to absorb this additional capacity of additional productive capacity. That is the logic for this model. So what is the equilibrium condition? From supply side, let me take the previous equation. I have erased that, though I should not have done that, but it was delta K multiplied by delta Y and delta K. That is the incremental or the marginal capital output ratio, this, and delta K, this is this one. So to this we can write simply I, just in order to make the things less complex, because change in capital stock is nothing but the investment, and this we are writing simply the sigma. So sigma represents the marginal capital output ratio. Demand side, this was the supply. I'm sorry, I'm having to write it once again because I have mistakenly erased that. And for the demand side, this will be multiplied by change in investment per period of time, that is delta investment multiplied by 1 by S, or this is multiplier, and this is change in investment per period of time, and that will be this is, you can this. So in equilibrium, this thing and this thing should be equal, that is I multiplied by this delta investment multiplied by us. Equilibrium requires that these two should be equal. If they are not, then it is not equilibrium, and we will see as to what will happen if equilibrium is missed. And for that we will take the graph route. We will be presenting it through the geometric means, graphs. But before that, let me explain to you, let me mention the assumptions of the Domar's model. Even assumptions are not very much different from the Harrod's assumptions. What these assumptions are basically, assumption is that there is initial full employment. You begin with the position of employment, you assume that economy is in full employment. Now at what rate the things will be changing so as to keep it remain in equilibrium. Okay, so this assumption was there in Harrod's also. And second was, saving is a constant fraction of, constant fraction of the income. That is, of the income, a fixed portion per period will be saved, and that will remain so. That will not change. That means the saving functions will be the one that will originate from that will begin from origin. This will be the saving function, as there is no intercept, right? And since the function is coming from origin, marginal propensity to save and average propensity to save both will be the same. Okay, so I will reproduce diagram again. So technology remains constant. Remains constant. You should remember that each assumption has some of the implication for the model. Okay, you begin with the full employment equilibrium so as to see to it as to what be the requirement further, because if all economy is already in disequilibrium, then it will be difficult to identify as to what will happen, because the conclusion of the model is that there will be the problem of stability as far as the equilibrium is concerned. Saving is a constant fraction of income simply means the saving function is coming from the origin and a fixed portion that is not changing. Technology remaining constant simply means that marginal output capital ratio will also remain constant, because it is only the technological advancement that will change the marginal output capital ratio. Okay, and labor is the exogenous one. Labor doesn't come into picture anywhere in this. Okay, so with these assumptions, let me draw the diagram, and that will explain. On x-axis we measure national income, and on y-axis we measure saving and investment both. And as we have seen that saving functions is this. This is, let me extend it further. This is saving function. Okay, and investment in any time period, suppose it is this. Change in stock of capital, that is the investment, and this explains that, suppose this is I, since this is intersecting the saving function at this, so OY will be the equilibrium, and as per our assumption, this is the full employment level of output at this moment. Okay, now the growth process begins for the purpose of our model. Okay, now the investment that has taken place in this time period, which is equal to the saving function, and where it is equal to this is the level of income, which is the full employment level. This investment will augment the productive capacity. Increase in productive capacity simply means that the potential output in the next period should be OY1. That is, there will occur an increase of YY1 as a result of this investment which is taking place. Okay, depending upon the output capital, incremental output capital ratio. Now, in order to realize this output, capacity has been augmented. Potentially, economy can produce this level of output, but economy will be producing this level of output when its producers are sure enough that there will be sufficient demand, and that demand will come from the investment that will taking place in this time. So you can say, as far as the productive capacity is concerned, there is a time lag, and for the income generation, that is the short run. Okay, in the same time period. So in order for economy to produce at that level, investment function will have to shift from I to I1. Now, so this was the investment in the same time period, while the productive capacity has increased as a result of the previous period's investment. Here, investment is generating demand that will absorb this. If investment fails to increase by this amount, then there will be the problem of the deficiency of demand. In this additional capacity, output will not be realized. Capacity will remain unutilized. For example, similarly, the investment that has taken place in this time period, so for this time period, its utility is only to generate income, but for the next period, it will augment the productive capacity further. Okay, and economy can potentially produce Y2 level, but in order to absorb this level, investment will have to further increase from I1 to I2. Okay, now consider if if investment does not take place to the extent it is required by the capacity augmentation. Suppose in this time period where investment has to increase from I1 to I2 in order to absorb this capacity, or in order to bring about the equality in the demand and supply side, suppose investment increases only by this amount. Suppose investment increases only by this amount. What will happen? That means output will grow only by this. And this part will remain unutilized. This productive capacity will remain unutilized. That is already installed capacity will not be utilized for output. Rather, producers will prefer to curb their investment in the next time period. Any producer, whatever they have done, they are unable to sell in the market because there is a deficiency of demand. So they will curtail their investment, realizing that the economic environment is not sufficient. There is no sufficient demand for output in the economy. Economy might be going through the downward downturns as far as the business cycle is concerned. So producer will curtail investment. Curtailment of investment will reduce the income further. If producer slows down their investment, that will curtail the income further. And that means the producers will have to curtail the investment, shrink their investment again, leading to further decline in the demand. So this process will go on, and equilibrium, if once reached, it will not be regained. This is what the Domar had suggested. So you can notice that of the Keynesian proposition that in the short run investment performs two functions, while in the short run investment performs two functions, while in the short run there is only income generation function which matters. In the long run both are important, but that is with more explicitity, that is more explicit as far as the Domar is concerned. In Harrod that is not that explicit, but implicit there, it is implicit there, because in order to have the warranted rate of growth in Harrod, that will be based on that. Okay, so there is the difference only in the details, otherwise conclusion is largely the same between of both Harrod and Domar, and it is for this reason that this model is normally called Harrod-Domar model, although both have given it separately. So guys, I think this is sufficient for Domar. We will prefer any clarification that you might seek. So we will be welcoming if you comment upon in E.Z.Classes. Okay, thank you very much.